You're on mute, but that's okay.
Sorry, just got off a Zoom call and now I'm on a Cisco call and the buttons are in the wrong place. So sorry about that. Hello, everybody.
There.
Hey.
I have that between Zoom and Microsoft Teams all the time,
Yeah.
toggling back and forth. Hey, Matt, I always get confused on this. So is this streamed live to WHC TV or is it recorded and then posted afterwards?
Let's ask staff that's here, either from the town or from WHCT, so that we could all find out at the same time.
Okay.
I think it's, I'm not sure.
It is both. So it will be streamed live online, and then it should also have a recording that should be out.
Thank you. Helpful to know.
So Ronnie, this will be your introduction to the 3 a.m. cable access crowd.
Yes, very excited for that.
Let's see. We've got 9 members this time, quorum of 5. So we'll wait until the 5th joins us, which I imagine is only a minute or so. And I'll send a couple folks quick reminders.
I see Shelley had just joined us.
Oh, great.
Just to
So 7:04. I'll give it one more minute, and then we'll get started and we'll let them join in. There's a presenter. Technical difficulty, or if he has the right link in the at the front end here. The signal that we can get started anytime the town and WHC TV is ready. And just give me a signal.
We are ready to go.
Good.
Yep.
Good evening, everybody. Call to order. I'm Matt Masunis, Chair of the Conservation Environment Commission, Town of West. welcoming you to tonight's virtual meeting. Today's date, October 26th, 2020. The required meeting agenda and application materials are all available on the town website. Because in-person attendance at public meetings is likely to increase the risk of transmission of COVID-19, this hearing is conducted in accordance with Governor Lamont's Executive Order 7B, and I believe more recently 9H supplemented that. So for the records, I will now call the roll. Matt Masunis, present. Ted Newton. And remember to take yourselves off mute when the time comes to announce your presence with us.
Am I present?
Ted, I
say present? Okay, good.
I'll go in the order I'm seeing the Hollywood Squares. Rick Bush.
Present.
Thank you. Ronnie Rodman.
Present.
Thank you. Sean Daly.
Here.
That completes the roll of attendance for those in attendance. And the chair determines we've met quorum with 5 of 9 at this time, possibly to be joined by more in just a few moments. So commission members and town staff are participating by WebEx. Members of the public can view the meeting live on West Hartford Community Television or on West Hartford Community Interactive Comcast Channel 5 and Frontier Channel 6098 or at www.whctv.org. The meeting is also being recorded for on-demand viewing, which will be available on the town website. Because of the virtual format of this meeting, there are some special rules and procedures that I'll need to cover before I begin. First, I ask all participants to please mute the microphones on your devices when you are not speaking. Second, pursuant to Executive Order 7B, all speakers must state their name and title each time they speak. Also, I will, and for the sake of members of the commission here, I will encourage the term commission member. Not address other participants directly. Questions and requests for information must be made through the chair. After, state your name and simply preface your question or comment with through the chair. And when you're done, I will recognize the person who is most appropriate to respond to the question. Although these practices may feel rigid and awkward, they will ensure the meeting is conducted in an orderly fashion and that members of the public who are listening can understand the discussion. I'd like to conclude by thanking everyone in advance for your patience. This is our second virtual public meeting, and there are bound to be bumps and glitches along the way, but we remain committed to the principles of open and transparent government. With that in mind, the first agenda item that we have is a informational presentation for the edification of the commission, examining different types of fuel that may be used in school buses, so as to, in the future, potentially ascertain if any parameters of the manner in which the town contracts for school busing need or should be changed to comport with the environmental objectives that this commission may establish. At this time, the presenter is unavailable. However, they may become available later in the meeting, and therefore we will skip past new business item A. And my apologies to the commission and to everyone on this process matter. We had skipped right over the approval of CEC meeting minutes from our meeting as of September, and that would be this day of our Lord as up 28th, September 28th. Thank you. And so do I hear a motion to approve said meeting minutes?
I make a motion to approve the meetings.
Motion by Rick Bush. Is there a second? And Ted Newton, you may be on mute.
Yes, so Ted Newton, Commission members, just a point of clarification, it looks like the agenda item for approval of minutes is from August 31st, not from September.
Carryover from the last agenda. That's interesting. Yeah, that was why I had to scramble just now when it came to where those meeting minutes actually were. So we'll get that changed on the town website and recirculate. But in the meantime, I know the commission members did all receive. Ronnie, you might have been brand new at that point. If you didn't receive minutes, feel free to abstain. Otherwise, we can, I think, move forward as those minutes were circulated to all members after this. Any objections?
Sharon?
Recognizing Sean Daly.
Chairman, I don't think I received the minutes. I looked in my my email, so I have not had a chance to review those, so I'll probably be abstaining as well.
Okay, interesting. That actually takes us below quorum for approval of meeting minutes, which is a fascinating position to be in on such a matter of import for the town. You know what? I will, with the permission of other members, if there are no objections, we're going to take a look at that over the course of the next few minutes, so as not to hamstring the agenda here, and move on with new business, and then potentially return to this before the adjourning of this meeting, just so that we could settle that for the sake of town records, if that's all right with everybody. Awesome. Thank you. So moving into new business, we are going to go to item B and start with the town and its application for Fern Street Bridge, IWW number 1127 of the Engineering Division of the Town of West Hartford, requesting approval of an inland wetlands and watercourses permit to conduct certain regulated activities which may have an adverse impact on a wetland area. Proposing to replace the Fern Street Bridge, including a realignment of the West Branch Trout Brook for approximately 200 feet upstream of the bridge. Proposed work is within the watercourse and within the 150-foot upland review area. With that, I defer to town as to presentation and to take PowerPoint.
Thank you. I'll kick it off. It's Dwayne Martin, the West Hartford Town Engineer. So we're going to do a presentation tonight about the Fern Street Bridge that is located near Fern Ridge Park. And with me tonight, I have our consultant, who is the designer of the bridge replacement project, Shelley Plude and Matt Sanford from Mylona McBroom. We hired them to design the project. They have a PowerPoint that they're going to run through. If you guys want to prep that, I'll keep going while you're getting that ready. Essentially, the bridge that is out there now was constructed in 1939. It is an older concrete bridge structure, which does get inundated with water, both, obviously on top of the bridge, but all around the bridge during flooding events, and has deteriorated through the years. The town did a repair project back in 2000, about 20 years ago, and those repairs are now failing. The bridge has a load restriction on it. I believe it's 36 tons. We have fire trucks in town that are heavier than that. That's obviously a major route from a transportation standpoint and next to a very popular park. The town was lucky enough to obtain a grant to perform the replacement. For the grant amount is about $3 million. Total bridge project cost is greater than that. The remainder of whatever is over $3 million will be paid for by town bonds, and that was already approved in a previous town budget. Project is at approximately 90% design completion. In addition to the local inland wetlands permits, there are other permits that our consultant has submitted, and we'll take some time to go through. They'll go through that as part of their presentation. And I just want to say, to preface before they get into the PowerPoint, it started as a bridge replacement project, but then as we went through early parts of the design, hydraulics and other reasons and recommendations by the consultant caused the project to quickly blossom to more than just a bridge project. So you'll see, if you haven't already, they'll show you in their presentation that there's some significant improvements that are planned in Fern Ridge Park on the upstream side of the bridge. And there's some improvements on the downstream side of the bridge as well, but not as much as in the park. And we have done some collaboration and outreach with some of the abutters. including the Friends of Fern Ridge Park, and received a lot of favorable feedback. They also, Friends of Fern Ridge Park did submit a letter of support for the project. And so without further ado, I'll hand it off to Matt and Shelley to go into the PowerPoint presentation. Thank you.
Issue, so I had to join my phone. Hello?
We can hear you.
Yep, we can hear you.
Okay, great. All right, great, thank you. So we have a lot that we can go through. I'm going to give sort of the more, abbreviated version of this because we could talk for a while about this project, as Dwayne alluded to. We have a lot going on here. So I'll probably skim through some of the opening slides here. I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with where this bridge is. We're immediately north of Fern Ridge Park. I just wanted to kind of highlight the channel alignment because this is something that we'll be talking about as I get into the presentation. The limits of our project start right about where that pedestrian bridge is and extend to about 60 or 70 feet downstream. And then the limits of our roadway project are just west of the Fern Ridge parking lot entrance here and extend to the parking lot entrance on the opposite side of the road. Just for some context, we do have a floodway and floodplain here. Dwayne had alluded to the other permits that we're obtaining. This is the driving factor behind those permits. We are seeking permits from DEP and Army Corps. Matt Sanford will go into that in a little bit more detail later, but as you can see from this graphic, the floodway itself is very wide, not to mention the floodplain. This bridge is definitely hydraulically undersized, and we're going to be making some improvements to that, but there is expected to still be some flooding through this location. As Dwayne said, the bridge needs to be replaced due to some serious structural deficiencies. The town had repaired it some time ago. Those repairs are since failing. The superstructure is in pretty rough shape. It's got a lot of spalling, a lot of cracking in the concrete T-beams, and the existing substructure, those abutments, are scour critical. There's a lot of scour occurring, particularly on the eastern side. So overall, the bridge, it's reached its life expectancy and it's time to be replaced. Some quick hydraulic information. The existing structure is hydraulically inadequate. Typically, we go for the 50 or the 100-year storms. This bridge is going to be overtopped by the 25. We're going to make some minor adjustments to the water surface elevations, but due to restrictions downstream in the channel, we're not able to make significant improvements. And so just some quick photos. Again, I'm sure everyone's familiar with the site. It's a fairly low-lying area, fairly flat through Fern Street here. Very minimal underclearance. It doesn't take much for this to fill up. One of the things that we want to address is this situation that's going on here. There's a lot of buildup of organic debris and sediment, particularly on the western side of the channel. And then this eastern side on the outside of the bend, that's where the bridge is getting attacked by scour. And a few more photos, just after a heavy rain, this fills up pretty quickly. So there's a lot of water that comes through here. Some examples of those deteriorated areas. The channel walls, we're going to be impacting those. The existing walls are pretty much entirely this concrete sidewalk slab. There's a lot of trees growing up through them. They're in pretty rough condition, and we'll be addressing those as a part of this project. So just a quick summary of what we're doing. We're proposing to replace this bridge with a 33-foot span, so we're going a little bit wider than what's out there today. We're proposing to use pre-stressed concrete box beams and concrete abutments on micropiles. And the reason why we went with box beams, we did do a preliminary engineering report and type study for this. We have vetted a few different structural alternatives, and we went with the pre-stressed box beam because that gives us a smooth bottom. The whole underside of the bridge superstructure is going to be smooth. What you have out there today with individual beams, debris can get lodged in under there between the beams. It can cause damage to the structure. By going with that smooth bottom, it helps things flow through the bridge a little bit better. We're doing a drilled pile foundation because we have the water main. There's a large 36-inch water main that goes underneath the bridge, and so we're going to be drilling rather than hammering piles in order to minimize impacts to that utility. We're realigning about 250 feet of the channel upstream, starting with that pedestrian bridge, and we're doing a little bit of minor widening downstream, and I'll show that in the next few slides. As a part of that channel reconfiguration, we are also reconfiguring the spillway as it comes out of the pond that's in Fern Ridge Park. That spillway and the geometry of it is contributing to some of the issues that we're seeing out there. We are going to be replacing the channel walls on the eastern side upstream of the bridge and along the pond, and those are going to be modular block walls. On the western side of the water course, as it flows through Fern Ridge Park, we're actually going to be restoring that to a more naturalized stone revetment with some joint plantings. And then on top of that, we're going to be reconstructing the parking lot on the western side. So just some background as to how all of this sort of developed. Obviously, the bridge needs to be replaced. It's in poor structural condition. We propose doing some channel realignment work because the current geometry of what's going on out there, there's some sharp bends in the water course, and it's that geometry that's causing some hydraulic issues between the debris buildup and the scour. And so we're proposing to soften the channel approach as it comes into the bridge to help alleviate some of those issues. And since the bridge is undersized, all of that debris that builds up actually worsens that condition. So hopefully by doing this, we'll alleviate that, making the bridge a little bit wider. Things will flow a little bit better. As I said, it'll still overtop during a 25-year storm. But all of these changes, as I've discussed here, and I'll show you on a subsequent slide, should alleviate those issues.
Mr. Chairman, point of information.
Sure.
Mr. Chairman.
Sean Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Daly, Commissioner. Just wanted to know if you wanted to save questions for the end or if you wanted to have questions during the presentation. If that was mentioned, I missed it. I apologize.
It wasn't mentioned, but it's a great question. I'll put that to the prerogative of the presenter and what she would prefer.
I'm comfortable with either. I can answer questions as we go. If people ask questions as we come up, or we can save them to the end. Either way, I'm fine with. So.
If there's anything pressing, I'd encourage asking along as we go.
And point of information, Mr. Chairman?
Yes, sir.
If I might ask 3 quick questions.
Absolutely. Please proceed.
So I'd like to know, we do know that there's going to be dredging done with the trout, with Trout Brook, as mentioned in our last meeting from August. Will the dredging cause any challenges or delays with this project? I thought that the dredging was supposed to resolve a lot of what the presenter is speaking to.
I can't speak to the dredging project, but while you may be able to go in there and clean out what's there today, if the geometry of the channel is left as is, it's just going to continue to develop. So by addressing these things, it's more of a long-term, it'll help the condition of the bridge and it'll help reduce those issues in the long term.
Mr. Chairman, is the presenter aware of the dredging project that's being proposed?
No,
to the presenter, please proceed.
No, it had not been discussed with us.
Previous but separate town project, right?
Okay, helpful. And then just a couple more questions. I missed on I don't know if it was on the previous slide, but Chairman, I'm wondering how old the bridge is.
Is the presenter equipped with information of the bridge date and age?
I believe it's 1913 or 1915. It might stay on the.
I thought it's Dwayne Martin, West Hartford Town Engineer. I thought it was constructed in 1939.
Oh,
I think it does. I think it does say it on there on one section.
Yeah, 1939. Yeah, I think the water main went in 1913. That's what I'm thinking of. But yes, the bridge is 1939.
The digital forensics shall back up Mr. Martin's assertion of 1939.
Thank you. And then last question is, you mentioned issue with the low bridge height. Can you just explain a little bit further how the concrete box frame and micropiles is that planning to lift the bridge height but also the road? Not my area of expertise, so.
So no, not at all. The bridge elevation and height is not changing because there is so much water flowing over the top of the roadway. If we raise this up, we're actually going to be impounding more water on the Fern Ridge side. So it was a delicate balance between trying to improve the flooding conditions while not worsening the flood elevation. So the low part of the bridge is going to be a little bit higher, and the roadway will be essentially the same.
I got it. All right, thank you. Appreciate it.
Great questions. Thank you, Mr. Daly. Please proceed, Ms. Plord.
Thank you. So I'm picking up where I left off. During construction, the parking lot that's on the western side of the channel, it's going to be used as construction laydown and staging for the contractor. And so as they're finishing up the project and backing out, we're going to be redoing that parking lot while we're out here, while we're impacting that area. And we're going to be making some geometry changes. Right now, it's a fairly large paved surface that's not really efficient as far as the number of parking spaces. So we're going to be reconfiguring and reconstructing that parking lot and actually converting it into a reclaimed gravel surface so that we can increase our pervious surface area. And then on top of that, with all of this disturbance, we're actually going to have quite a bit of landscaping, particularly on the park side and along the water course to improve the wetland condition. I'll get into the stage construction plans a little bit later. We have a lot of different stages to this project because we have a lot of water to move around. There's a couple of stages of water handling using cofferdams through the bridge. And then once we get into the upstream channel work, we're going to be actually moving the flows into the pond so that we can do the channel work, and then into the channel so that we can do the work in the pond. So there'll be some water moving back and forth there. Overall site impacts, during construction, we will need to lower the water surface elevation in the pond. That'll be a temporary condition. We are going to have stipulations in the plans and in our specifications that the contractor needs to address any wildlife, any fish, or other aquatic organisms that might be in there. So we will be taking care of that during those couple of weeks while the water surface elevations need to be drawn down. We're going to actually introduce some stop logs to the spillway so the town will have future control over the elevation of the ponds, but that's largely to allow the contractor some flexibility as well while they're building this. Property impacts, we have a temporary driveway that I'll show later on in the presentation. And then we do have a fair amount of tree removal. There's a number of trees along the downstream side that need to be removed to widen the channel and to rebuild the wall. And we have 3 trees in the park itself that are going to be impacted by the temporary utility relocation. But we'll be addressing a lot of that in our landscaping plan. So hopefully everyone can see this, and I can try and zoom in a little bit. This is easier to see. So this is our proposed bridge design. I've highlighted here in blue, this is the original channel geometry. The bridge crosses Fern Street pretty much perpendicular. And what we're going to be doing is actually introducing a skew to the bridge, rotating the bridge a little bit and widening it. And that's going to help us straighten out that channel alignment, particularly on the upstream side. So here's our existing bridge here. And then this is the new bridge abutment on the eastern side, the new bridge abutment on the western side. Our span width was dictated in part by the utility, the large 36-inch water main that's below the bridge, but also by the driveway that we have right here on the northern side. So you can see from this plan, we are replacing a portion of that existing retaining wall that's along the channel there. Again, that's going to be a modular block. And then the remainder of the channel where we're widening a little bit through here, that's going to be restored to a natural bank. On the downstream side, we also have a couple of in-stream boulder features. This is to create some fish habitat. This came out of consultation with DEP Fisheries. And then I'm going to get into the next slide in a bit where you can see the park impacts, but you can see the beginning of our channel realignment here, the natural stone revetment that's going to be on that western side. And then moving into the park, you can see the remainder of our channel impacts. So again, that blue represents the existing channel, and this is going to be our new channel alignment. So it's still going to have that S-curve to it, but it's going to be considerably straighter. Again, that western bank is now going to be naturalized stone, and there'll be joint plantings in there to give it a much more soft aesthetic. And then the peninsula between the watercourse and the pond, that's going to be replaced, and it's pretty much in its entirety from the pedestrian bridge and then the entirety of the pond side wall. And we're achieving the channel realignment largely by just narrowing that peninsula. It's fairly wide as it is today, and one of the issues that was brought to us early on in the design was that they didn't want people going out on that peninsula. People can fall into the pond or fall into the watercourse, so this is going to be narrowed up. There's going to be a fence here and then some plantings to discourage people from going out there. I mentioned the spillway. So the existing spillway here, where my cursor is generally parallel to the watercourse. Having that in this configuration, the watercourse suddenly more than doubles in width. And what that does is it slows down velocities, and that's why we're seeing all that buildup of material in here. So we're going to be turning that spillway so that it's perpendicular to the channel, and it'll maintain a more consistent flow. Adding into the channel realignment, we have a number of in-stream features made out of naturalized rounded stone. Some of them are for fish habitat to allow fish and other aquatic organisms places to rest and to settle. And then other structures such as these deflectors here. And on this side, on the outside bends, that's to help keep flows down the middle of the channel or reduce scour. You can see our parking lot redesign here. We're removing all of this parking lot area here on the western side, this parking lot area here along the eastern side. And this allows us to maintain the same number of spaces in a significantly more efficient area. So all of this will now be restored to grass, and this will generally be a pervious parking surface with the exception of some accessible spaces down at the southern end of the parking lot. And what's not out there today is a separate pedestrian access for people to get into the park from this side. So we'll be providing a separate path to that pedestrian bridge. And moving forward, we're actually going to be replacing that pedestrian bridge that's out there today.
Question, Ms. Plord. That's currently an impervious surface that you're turning into a grass parking lot?
Yes, it's a bituminous concrete parking lot that's going to be gravel.
Thank you.
Point of information, ask a couple of questions, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daly. Yes, sir.
Thank you, Sean Daly, Commissioner. You mentioned trees removal as part of the project, and we know, I know from social media, there's been backlash about removal of trees along the Trout Brook area. Has there been any type of environmental impact study done for this project, or is the project considered too small?
The project was screened by the DOT for a number of potential environmental impacts. Tree removal was not one of their deepest concerns. Obviously, we understand from a local level that is something that we need to be addressing, and hopefully on the next slide, you can see the number of trees that we are putting back. And obviously, we've had that conversation, particularly with the property owner for the American School for the Deaf. I can zoom in here because most of the trees are impacting on their property. I think we have 4 or 5 trees along that bank that are going to be impacted, and then 3 trees in the park that are going to be taken down. So we are cognizant of that, but it wasn't necessarily part of the environmental screening.
Great. And then, Mr. Chairman, a follow-up to your question. So what, it was good to hear it. At first, it sounded like it was removing parking, but it sounds like we're replacing hardtop parking with gravel, but I didn't hear what the reasoning was for that, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, sir. I was actually a little bit curious about that. Ms. Plord.
Sure. So in discussions with the town, it seemed like it was going to provide some benefit to this project to remove pervious surface and allow it to infiltrate. One of the things that is happening out there today, because this whole area is paved and it all pitches towards the channel, it's actually eroding this bank here. So the existing wall on this outside bend is already failing because of scour. But adding on top of that, all of this water is aimed more or less right here. And there's a lot of erosion of that bank and undercutting of that pavement that's starting to happen. And so by turning this into a pervious surface, it increases infiltration and decreases concentrated runoff. So overall, it allows the water to filter naturally, as opposed to all of that coming down and going straight into the water course.
Thank you. So to get this straight and reconciling what at least I thought I heard with the first statement with clarifying explanation, it is currently impervious surface. It will be changed to gravel. Grassland or parking on field played no role here. Do I have that right? Or is there some form of directed parking toward grassland?
No, all of the parking will be on a gravel surface when the project is complete.
Okay. Any other questions at this moment?
Sorry, Mr. Chairman, just for clarification. So there will be no longer any hard top parking surface whatsoever. It will all turn to gravel?
Ms. Floyd.
With the exception of the entrance, simply so that you don't have gravel getting pushed out into the street. And by code, we need to pave those accessible spaces, which is this area shown down here. So we have two ADA accessible parking spaces in the parking lot. This limited area will be paved. All of the rest of this will be pervious gravel.
Thank you. You just answered my question, which was I didn't know about the ADA parking and how that would be affected. So thank you.
Great. You are free to proceed.
Okay. Thank you. So now getting into the landscaping, again, we recognize that we are unfortunately impacting a number of trees in order to make these improvements. And this is just to give you an idea of what our proposed landscaping plan is going to look like. So we have 3 trees that are going to go back along the American School for the Deaf property, which is on the northwestern side, and then 1 tree that's going to go in on the, northeastern side over here, and then 1 on the northwestern side. Then the majority of trees are going to be going back into the park. Apologize for the plan sort of splitting it here, but we have 3 larger trees. Hopefully we're going to be able to obtain some larger caliber trees to replace those mature trees that are in the park today. But you can see all of these circular graphics represent trees that are going to be put back as a part of our landscaping. On top of those trees, we have what's called live stakes that are going to go into the stone revetment area. And so that is going to create a much more naturalized, a much softer bank, and then landscaping that'll tie into that and sort of ease us into the grass area up here. And then we'll have a nice little seating area and overlook. And then on top of that, we're going to be doing some, it's called the Littoral Shelf. So there's going to be some marshy wetland plantings in the pond itself. And the intention of this here, again, this was in consultation with DEP Fisheries, is to improve the habitat within the pond. So for all of those fish that are in there, that are stocked in there, this is going to be a nice feature to help improve the quality of the habitat. So yeah, we've got a considerable amount of landscaping associated with this project. Multiple trees that are going to go back in. And then this is just sort of a quick plant palette of the types of species that are going to go in. We have had some conversations with the parks department folks about the type of trees that they want to see out here, the type of plantings that they're going to be maintaining in the future. So We have a variety of different tree types, a handful of plantings. The plants on the right here, that's going to be sort of upland on top of the bank. And then these are the type of plantings that we're going to be going into the pond itself. So very natural, wetlands, marshy looking plants along that wall, creating that habitat area, but also sort of masking the new concrete block wall that's going to be going in. And then just moving on to the details of the bridge itself. So I mentioned a pre-stressed concrete deck unit bridge. We do have a couple of utilities that we have to create some space for in here, but you can see from the section, that's that smooth bottom that I was talking about that'll help flows move through there better. Whereas right now you've got individual beams, you've got turbulence in between those beams, potential for debris. This will streamline that and smooth that out. You can see our abutments and the piles as we're going to be straddling that utility there. And as far as the water surface elevations, so the low quarter of the bridge, that 122 and a third feet there, again, that's more or less the same that's out there today. And then just for reference, the upstream design water surface elevation, so that's the 100-year flood, that's about 126.56 feet. So we're a little over 4 feet higher with the 100-year flood. So that's sort of reflective of the water surface elevations out here, is that flooding will be a little bit better, but we're talking maybe an inch or two. It won't be a substantial change. And our modeling indicates that there is no rise in the floodway or the floodplain. So that's really the critical factor there. And then getting into the water handling and how this is going to be constructed, again, hopefully everyone can see this. So we have several different stages that are going to be happening as we're building the abutments. As we start to build the abutments, this bridge is going to be built in 2 stages. So the road will be, one lane will be open at all times, alternating one-way traffic. We will have a temporary signal that's going to control traffic through the bridge. We're going to be building the Fern Ridge Park side of the bridge first. We'll need some cofferdams within the channel to build that abutment, which will generally be behind the existing abutment. We'll start to do that bank realignment there. There's going to be multiple stages to this. Once that's complete, we move on to the abutment on the other side. We now open this new side of the channel up, cofferdam on this side. So this will be built one side at a time, and then we'll flip to the north side of the road. Again, you can see the cofferdams that will go in. Channel flows will be on the western side. We'll build the abutment here, build the wing wall, and then flip to the other side to build the other abutment. While this is happening, we are going to have to do a temporary driveway connection because this driveway is so close to the bridge. We're not going to be able to maintain it in its current location because of excavation, so we'll have a temporary driveway that will cross over. And as Dwayne mentioned, we have been speaking to the property owners so that they're aware that this is happening, and we have their buy-in as we move forward. So the bridge, once that's straightened out, this will likely take one construction season, so about April to November. Once that's finished, we'll move on to the channel. And this is where we start shifting water back and forth a little bit. So for the first stage of the park work, water flows will be maintained in the existing channel, and we will block off that inlet pipe that goes into the pond. And so this is where we will draw down the pond to some level. Won't be completely drained, but we need to lower the water surface elevation so that the contractor can get in here and install that modular wall without having to pump too much water out. So at this stage, water will be low in the pond, flows will be going through Trout Brook, and it will be cofferdammed off with sandbags. And then moving on for the remainder of the channel work. So at this point, the peninsula wall has already been replaced. Now we're going to remove the inlet pipe that currently feeds the pond, and we're going to open that up as a temporary channel and block flows in Trout Brook, transferring them into the pond over the new spillway that we've just completed and through the bridge. That's when they'll remove the existing wall on this side and put that new stone revetment in. Once all that's complete, then we back out and do the parking lot work. At that point, we're out of the water. We are in the upland area, but we are out of the water for the park work, which is the final stage. And then landscaping would follow the completion of the parking lot reconstruction. So Dwayne had mentioned we have some other permits in the works. Matt Sanford is our wetland soil scientist, and he's handling all of our permit applications. Matt, do you have a few things you'd like to add here? Yeah. I can't see him, so I don't know if he's trying to weigh in on it.
I can see Mr. Stanford. I didn't get audio from him, though.
Oh. All right.
I could see that you did try to talk, but I did not hear it.
Okay. I was having some audio issues as well joining through the web application, so maybe that's the second problem. But yeah, if Matt's not able to weigh in, I can certainly speak to this. So there has been quite a bit of discussion at the state level for this project as well, since we have floodway and floodplain impacts. We've had multiple conversations with DEP Fisheries. So a lot of the in-stream boulder features that I talked about, a lot of the deflectors and some of the other in-stream features, that's something that's been driven by our conversations with DEP, who's looking to see the habitat through this area improved. Right now, it's pretty sterile sidewalks, concrete slab walls. There's not much in the way of habitat out there, so we're introducing those in-stream features and some of those plantings in the pond at their suggestion. We did present this project to the DOT to have it screened by the regulators. And they've given us buy-in as far as the permits that are required at the state and federal level. We do not have any NDDB hits here, so no species of special concern that we need to be taken care of. Obviously, I mentioned we will have some provisions for any fish or critters that might be in the pond, and we have to draw the water down, but no sensitive or threatened species out here. So from an Army Corps level, we're obtaining an individual permit. So this is essentially the highest permit classification that we can get through Army Corps. There's the self-verification, which is when you have minimal impacts, the PCN when you start triggering some of their further review, and then the individual permit because we have, we're doing 250 feet of channel realignment. That's essentially what's triggering that. And then on top of that, in conjunction with that, we have the Army or DEP 401 water quality certificate. And then obviously our local application through you and through the Inland Wetland Agency. As Dwayne said, we've done quite a bit of property owner coordination. We've met with a few of the property owners out there, discussed the project with them so they're aware of the impacts to their property. And of course, we've had several meetings with the Friends of Fern Ridge so that they're aware and that this is dovetailing nicely with some of the work that they already had planned as a part of their own park improvement. And that essentially wraps up what I have. Obviously, we've been answering questions throughout the presentation, but certainly if there are more at this time, I'm happy to answer those.
Very thorough. Thank you, Ms. Plurd. I see a question, Mr. Daly.
Thank you. Thanks, Mr. Chairman. Just quickly, you mentioned you met with property owners in the Fern Association. Has there been any concerns expressed by those groups at all for the project?
I'll answer that. I'll answer that question. It's Dwayne Martin, town engineer. Shelley and I met with most of the property owners, but I also had other conversations with them without her presence. So there were 3 that we met with, and for the most part, there weren't any concerns except for the last one. And the reason for that is they would be the recipients of the temporary driveway across their front yard in order to facilitate access to the land. Luckily, the 2 property owners get along, and there wasn't a real impact to the front yard as there's no landscaping or walls or anything like that that would get displaced by the temporary driveway. But all in all, they pretty much recognized the bridge needs to be replaced and understood what was needed to complete that.
Thank you, Mr. Martin. Further questions? Oh, and in the meantime, I'll recognize in the midst of this new business, we are also joined by a member of the commission, Emily Scott. Thank you for joining after the roll call. So I wanted to make sure I mentioned that. And good evening.
I'll note for the record, however, that thanks to my involvement with Friends of Fern, I'm not commenting on this. I'm kind of keeping my hands off on both sides.
The abundance of caution is noted.
If I may, Dwayne Martin, town engineer again. A couple of things I just wanted to add, just to get them onto the record. We are, I don't know, Shelley, if you covered these items, so I apologize if you've heard these during the presentation, but we are adding a bench next to the bridge itself with a pathway. Shelley mentioned there's a new path that's being created to separate the pedestrians from the vehicles in the parking lot. You can see on the screen there's a side path that comes out from that path, and there will be a bench placed there. And also along the edge of the parking lot, there'll be guide rail, some wooden guide rail. Right now, there's nothing preventing a vehicle from going off the parking lot and into the water course. So we are adding that protection there. And to be 100% transparent, there are trees on the south side of Fern near the bridge that are going to get removed, and they have some pretty good size. They've been there for a while. They're not in the best of health. A couple of them are in decent shape. We had a utility meeting, and unfortunately, to facilitate the construction, which requires a crane to swing some of the bridge elements into place, we have to relocate some utility poles temporarily onto the park property, which then facilitated the removal of, I think, 3 trees and the pruning of 1. Those will all be replaced as best we can with, as Shelley mentioned, some larger caliber trees. And the tree discussion kind of built as we went through the project, but we are working with the Friends of Fern and Public Works on the selection of the trees, including those replacements. Just wanted to mention that. Thank you.
Good to hear. Thank you, Mr. Martin. Are there further questions? And please feel free to go off mute to flag that because on my ticker of video feeds, I might not see everybody at the same time. And so if hands were raised, I might not have caught it. So please go off mute and mention it if you do want to pose any questions or comments at this time. Hearing none, or simply being on the horizon of my Wi-Fi and perhaps I'm stalled right now, I'll assume that I'm hearing none. And as a result, I would like to thank the town for this presentation, as well as Malone and McBroom. We do appreciate the work that you're doing right here, and also for the review opportunity. So thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, very thorough.
Great. With the Commission's indulgence, I'd like to backtrack for a moment to approval of CEC meeting minutes. Effects of COVID and stay at home, we dilate time for everybody. It feels like it's longer than it's been. Our last meeting was on August 31st, and it was our September meeting whereby the agenda had not come together in time for that, so as to be processed by the town, and we had deferred business to this October meeting. So we are correctly approving minutes from August 31st at this meeting. So with that, I'll take motions for approval, and those were circulated.
I make a motion to approve.
I'll second.
Second from Bush, was it? Rick Bush? Thank you. All in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Minutes are approved. Thank you, everybody. We are going to proceed now to agenda item 3C, discussion on accessory dwelling unit zoning policy. This is a concept that was brought forward that is of interest to at least one member of the commission and wants to share information and thoughts with the rest of us. I will defer to Mr. Daly as to how he would like to characterize it and the objectives coming out of it.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Before I begin, may I ask a question concerning the concerning the Fern Street Bridge project?
If the appropriate people are still on, and now that we've moved off of this, I see that they're still on.
I actually think this is just for you, not for the folks from the Fern Street project.
All right, I'll take the pop quiz. We'll see how I do.
No, I just want to know what is our next steps here for the commission concerning the project.
Concerning that, if assuming no further dialogue, whether throughout the course of this meeting or perhaps informally through follow-up, we would memorialize what we have heard in summary through meeting minutes, and which are reflective of the obviously much more fuller transcription record here now that meetings are videotaped, and pass those meeting minutes along to the town, where they would, the most proximate use of them would come from town planning and zoning, where I presume they will be looking at this project probably in about a week's time, as that tends to be the routine tempo whereby the Conservation and Environment Commission may see items that are within a regulated area 1 week prior to their meeting for a vote in front of town planning and zoning.
So my question is then, do we need to have some sort of debriefing in order to come to a conclusion as to what gets put forth to planning and zoning?
I think that's reasonable. This hasn't been done yet digitally, so the question becomes firm guidance from elsewhere. I would test folks' comfort level in terms of, would you like to do that debriefing now? Would you like to move that to the end of the agenda? Or would you like to have said debriefing in between this meeting and the drafting of the meeting minutes, but not during this meeting? And I'll open it up to any thoughts that anybody has, because we're in a brave new world, and I don't know if there's a firm answer to this at the moment, at least procedurally, that we've encountered.
I'm fine with not spending time here during the, sorry, I didn't recognize, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Daly.
My apologies. Still learning. Sean Daly, Commissioner. So my opinion here would be that we don't necessarily spend this time doing it, but maybe between now and the meeting minutes, we can do either by email or phone calls to have discussion on what we provide as thoughts to the planning and zoning. That way, we're not lengthening the time that we're having here.
I'd be happy to indulge and facilitate that approach. Are there any other thoughts on that matter? Mr. Newton.
Ted Newton, commission member. No, I wouldn't say it's a different thought. I would agree with Sean on this one. I think we should start off by email, and then if we feel like we need to have a phone call to coalesce around an opinion or answer questions, then we can do that.
All right, and we shall state for the record in advance, whether it's accurate or not, that correspondence shall not constitute another official meeting of the CEC, but shall be. That way, more than half of members can weigh in, and we will not consider it a quorum. Again, I do not know the binding nature of the words I'm speaking, given the way that everyone is running meetings right now. Cool. So thank you very much. Thank you, Malone and McBroom. You're welcome to stick around if you like. And with that, are there any other thoughts on that matter before I simply move on? All right. Agenda item 3. Did I miss? Okay. Agenda item 3C, discussion on accessory dwelling unit zoning policy. Mr. Daly, do you want to lead off on that one?
Sure. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. So we do know that currently the town council is discussing what I would call expansion of the current ADU policy for the town. As such, I felt that my understanding is that currently there has been no environmental impact study for this proposal, and the town council, it seems to be, is moving this immediately to planning and zoning. I'm not sure, Mr. Chairman, and would look to your direction as far as protocol here is and what is what falls under the purview of the Conservation and Environmental Commission. But my thought would be that before anything moves to planning and zoning, that at the very least we should there's clear points based on my letter to the editor, which I provided to the commission, that there are potential environmental issues here that should be explored by this commission prior to anything going to planning and zoning. At the very least, some sort of environmental impact study.
Thank you, Mr. Daly. I guess just procedurally, I'll make the note that because this is a public meeting and said letter to the editor is not displayed on this screen, there has been correspondence from a variety of residents in town, at least that I've seen on wehot.com, with regards to ADU policy, and therefore the public may find such back and forth there, as well as through recordings of town council meeting. That's what I've uncovered on that. For process, this is an interesting question. I suppose to the extent that this commission in its entirety feels that there is an environmental rationale here that should be explored through the Conservation Environment Commission, then I think that we could make a case around that. Normally, we would, for example, in the last agenda item, be limiting our environmental scope to wetlands and regulated areas. But as you know from all of my advocacy over this past year, we are seeking to fulfill the full entirety or a greater entirety of what is under the Conservation Environment Commission's code for potential operations. And therefore, something could fall under the rubric of simple environment, and it would be under the purview of this commission. I think we would have to consult with town staff as far as whether or not we could successfully intercede there on procedural grounds, because that's an open question to the chair as well, frankly. But you know, I wouldn't necessarily discourage it as long as the commission in its entirety thinks that the environmental underpinnings of such a policy change are worthy in itself. It certainly, you know, should be before planning and zoning at some point as the
Mr. Chairman, a point of clarification.
story body of the town. Mrs. Scott, the chair recognizes Emily.
Thank you. Emily Scott, Commissioner. Since the term environmental impact statement has not been defined, and there are a number of different flavors of environmental impact statements, and what specifically does Mr. Daly think, through you to Mr. Daly, however this is supposed to work, please bear with me here. Through you, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Daly, what I guess, can we have some color on what exactly we think would be useful, because there are any number of levels of inquiry that can go into environmental impact statements.
Thank you, Ms. Scott. Some of this was, but I don't know about the entirety of it, was through but here as far as what manner of impact should be understudied, in your opinion, Mr. Daly.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for the opportunity to provide additional information. So there are, from the research that I've done, there are several environmental impact issues that could affect the town with ADUs, and there are plenty of sources cited for this. For example, the ADUs have been known to put a burden on town services, such as recycling, garbage collection, parking, as well as the utility grid. Keep in mind that what the ADUs are looking to do is potentially allow for the building of either on the property, within the same structure on the property, or an additional structure to the property with, as I recently learned, an additional kitchen facility and potential bathrooms facility. So there's additional sewage issues as well that could impact the environment, because these would be specifically for the ability for single family homes, not multifamily residences, but for single family homes to allow this. So you're immediately going from one family, which would normally be, let's say, a family of 4 or even 6, to suddenly either 2 families or multiple families living on the same property using the facilities. In addition, with the COVID crisis, we know that there has been cited issues about creating density, and adding density to properties have increased the dangers surrounding the virus. And so I think those are all areas that should be up to scrutiny with such a with such a proposal as this.
So,
Ms. Scott,
Mr. Chairman, through you to Mr. Daly, I understand the description of the areas of substantive evaluation that you're interested in pursuing. I guess my question is more in the nature of like what level. So if you're doing an environmental impact assessment under like the Connecticut Environmental Policy Act, for example, there's like different thresholds of review, and there's different like checkpoints. I guess I'm not hearing what sort of procedural pathway we're operating under, or essentially how this would work in the vision. If it's like a initial kind of scoping review to see if there are any big issues that we should dig into further, or kind of jumping right into a in-depth review, or who would take the laboring oar, like what are the kind of procedural slash framework concepts that we can operate with here.
Mr. Daly, do you have a response at the moment, or do you request any time on that?
No, absolutely happy to respond. So I think,
Sure.
one of the issues here, Mr. Chairman, is we don't know what we don't know, which is obviously the whole reason for an environmental impact study. What we do know is I think we can all agree that common sense would tell us that if you're adding more people to a residential property, there are going to be additional issues. There's going to be additional, as I mentioned before, additional recycling, additional garbage, additional sewage, additional impacts to the utility grid, additional parking issues. I mentioned about not to be redundant here, but right, I mentioned about the density and COVID. So my thought process here would be to have a study that reviews what exactly does impact the environment for expanding these type of ADUs. I don't know if we can get specific yet until we decide whether or not that needs to be done. But I think it's common sense that we need to look at these before. And if we need to have, I would imagine some sort of unbiased outside organization providing some sort of information to the commission that could help us understand what those impacts are.
Mr. Bush, you had a comment or question?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chairman. This is Rick Bush. I think that might be a little bit premature to suggest those types of studies, simply because we don't know how many properties would actually qualify to have an ADU created. Additionally, it would be no point in wasting the town's money on some sort of study like this. I think it would be part of the process of the applicant. Whoever was applying to create the new ADU would be responsible to do those types of studies to determine if the existing infrastructure was sufficient to handle additional density, on a piece of property. I don't think we need to burden the town or use the town's resources. I have a specialization in construction and real estate, so the ideas that Mr. Daly, Commissioner Daly presented are sound and relevant, but I think that it might be slightly, overly cautious in some ways. I know that specific density for a sewer. I mean, I am also a commissioner on the Metropolitan District Commission, specializing in the sewers, and there would be no adverse impact by adding an extra person or 4 or 6 to any piece of property in town. That would not burden the sewer. But I think it would be part of the applicant's responsibility to pay for any study that needed to be done prior to being approved for the ADU. And I think one of the things that we should take into consideration as members of this commission is what impact is it going to have on the town and the quality. I mean, I guess it's not really an environmental issue, more of a type of quality of life type of issue regarding neighborhoods and people. And do we want to turn our single family homes into 2-family homes all around town? I think that's maybe more of the issue that I see as being a problem, more than any of those impacts. So that's my comment.
Mr. Daly, you want to go next?
Yeah, I'd like a chance to respond, Mr. Chairman, to Mr. Bush's comments.
Let's do it.
Yeah, so appreciate Mr. Bush's and definitely recognizes Mr. Bush's expertise in this subject as a good friend and colleague. However, there certainly are citations that I've pointed out in my letter that provides proof points that there are indeed sewage and environmental impacts, as has been seen in other parts of the country that have provided similar laws to expanding ADUs. In addition, with all due respect, the response sounds a little bit like Obamacare when Speaker Pelosi said we've got to pass it before we can see what the problems are that's in it. In my opinion, this is not a situation where we want to, where study, we need to pass it first before we see any problems. I actually think just the opposite. We need to see, and we need to try and look at if there are any problems before we pass it. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Bush appears to want to respond.
Yep. And I just want to say that I'm not saying I agree with the fact that we should have ADUs. I'm just saying I'm not sure if those particular points of environmental, I'm not sure if it's an environmental commission issue. That's and I didn't agree that the town necessarily should spend money on environmental studies. I think that there's other reasons why it's a bad idea, and I do agree with Commissioner Daly on that it should be studied before instead of after. I didn't mean to imply that there's no urgency whatsoever to support this and to pass it. I think it does need to be studied thoroughly, and it needs to be understood what the true benefit. And I think the question that Commissioner Daly and I had discussed earlier is, what problem are we trying to solve? What problem is the town trying to solve by allowing people to create two-family homes in a single-family home zone, right? So that I don't think that there's that large of a problem that needs to be fixed to create these changes. So I think we're on the same page. I think we're just arguing maybe slightly different perspectives as to the way we get to the answer.
We have two hands up. Mr. Newton's was first.
We can't hear you.
You're on mute.
There you go.
Lots of background noise here. So Commissioner Newton, just responding to a couple of things. One is that we have not really considered the overall impact to town services in our discussions of environmental impact. And I think that there's probably another body that is more appropriately responsible for that than the Conservation Commission. And just to put it into context, if we have 30 or so pieces of property that are now eligible for the ADUs, it's not going to be a large impact across the town, either from a environmental impact, if in fact there is one, or from a services standpoint. So it seems like we all have limited time, and the town has limited money, as Commissioner Bush pointed out. I feel like this is not an issue that this commission needs to address.
Thank you, Mr. Newton. Scott, you had a comment?
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. This is Emily Scott. Point of clarification first, before I say anything else. Has there yet been legislative language for a new proposed zoning ordinance circulated, or are we still fully in the conceptual stage, consistent with the memo that's been posted to the town website about studies comparing like Simsbury's ordinance to Manchester's, et cetera, et cetera?
To my knowledge on that, which is incomplete, it's the latter, which is that we're working from a conceptual framework based on what was public so far. Mr. Bush has additional information he wants to elucidate us with. Please proceed.
Commissioner Bush, through you, Mr. Chairman. There was a special meeting of the town council early last week in which they went through a significant amount of detail regarding this proposal. It is not in a conceptual stage. It is much farther along than the conceptual stage. They have they've gone through. Todd Dumais, the town planner, has spent a significant amount of time and resources to create the language for zoning and how it would apply to different zones, how it would apply to setbacks and space and lot coverage. So there's a significant amount of detail in this proposal already. So it is moving quickly through the town. Yeah,
that's quite helpful. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. And
that might on this that I was thinking of providing, at least from the start, to ask the clarifying question of whether folks who have concerns about this, whether rooted in environmental policy or more broadly quality of life issues, whether or not we extend the environmental charge to that, which is intriguing, but we don't know if that's under our purview. If the main concern is with the possibility of splitting single family homes so as to create multifamily within the existing single family zoning footprint, or if the greater point of concern is the attachments that could be constructed onto the existing footprint of a property, or if the concerns apply equally to both. Because my understanding of accessory dwelling units is that they could kind of go in either of those directions, right? Whether new construction or just subdividing a single family, right? Mr. Bush.
That's exactly correct. This provides for either transforming a portion of your home into a separate unit, adding an addition onto your home as a separate unit, or completely constructing a new unit, such as converting a garage, either building a new garage like with an apartment above it, or converting an existing garage into an apartment. There's really, as far as I understand the language, there's almost no limit to how you can create this additional unit. It's your creativity would allow you to do whatever you want, pretty much. It's without, as long as it complies with current zoning that's in place.
And realistically, not the full population of residents may choose to comply with current zoning in place, and a number of these folks might decide to do this off the books as they currently may choose to do. That's just, it can't be dealt with through a formal issue of town, if other than citation, if it happens to be found, I assume.
You could do that now. I mean, anyone now could just do whatever they want. I mean,
exactly.
but there are other restrictions. It does have to be an owner occupied property. So the owner of the property must live in the primary dwelling. So if there's an accessory dwelling unit, the primary dwelling unit must be occupied by the owner of the unit. You can't purchase it as a two-family rental property, rent out both of the units. That is something that can't happen, and that would continue on with the deed in perpetuity.
Is this specific to detached or attached accessory dwelling units, or does it touch both of those? Does it matter whether or not it joins with the existing building footprint or not, or is part of that under existing policy? Does anyone happen to know?
Sean?
Yeah, it's both, right? It could either be, you know, you're redesigning your attic or your basement, right, to allow for a different family and rent that out, or you can create an attached or detached new building on your property to be able to rent out as both. So my understanding from the proposal is that it's both. I also had a couple of questions, if I may, Mr. Chairman.
Please proceed. To whom are they directed?
Yeah, in response, Sean Daly, Commissioner, in response to Mr. Newton's comments,
Sure.
I had a couple of questions, and one is, he mentioned that it's, you know, if there's consideration of overall impact to town services, that there would be a different committee that would be responsible for that. So I'd be interested in knowing which committee that is. And then also, I was questioning, I think he mentioned, you know, this might be small in that it affects 30 pieces of property, but my understanding is, and I don't know if that was just said out of example, but my understanding is this would be open, the ability to create an ADU would be open to all what I believe is considered R1 zone single family homes within the town of West Hartford, which there are a lot. That's not to say that everyone would immediately go and put an ADU on, but it would allow the town residents to be able to, if they so chose, which is why I see the potential for environmental impacts.
The question seemed to have an original directionality to it, although Mr. Bush wanted to add on to that or to respond in his own right to it. And I'll leave to Mr. Newton's prerogative if he wants to respond. I still haven't shared any opinions on this myself, but that's deliberate. I want to hear what everyone else has to say. Mr. Bush.
Commissioner Bush, through you, Chairman. 2 points. One, there is a lot of flexibility in what you can do, but you still must maintain certain specific zoning regulations. It's not a free for all. There are very strict regulations. So it's not, you can't just turn any house into a 2-family house. So I don't know all of the details. I listened to the meeting, but I don't recall it that specifically. The one other thing that I think that we may be able to add some power to this commission is that we could suggest to zoning that anybody who applies for this ADU must go through Conservation Commission for approval, that before it's allowed. Certainly that might provide us an opportunity to review on a case-by-case basis any ADUs that are requested. It would give us an opportunity to do those potential studies or require those potential studies to make sure that they're not taking advantage of the existing infrastructure without without adding burden to the infrastructure. So those are my 2 points, is that, just to quickly recap, that there are limits to what you can do through the zoning, and that I think that maybe if we had added some bite to our commission by asking to be included in the process through the application process for new ADUs.
Interesting. So responding not to your comment, but on your comment, really, to my last knowledge was the September special meeting on which of the town council, on which a little bit of that did come up. And as I recall, I think the default policy was called as of right, where essentially you draw the box, or the town draws the box, and if a property owner's application fits into that, it's automatically approved. So the suggestion here is to interject this commission where a board does not have an automatic approval measure, but rather has discretion over it within the purview it chooses to exercise. Right? That's what that sounds like. Mm-hmm. Okay. A note in the chat from Ronnie. Do you have some questions? And again, I still haven't said my full piece here. And please proceed.
Thank you. I'm kind of sitting back just because I'm new, but I do have a couple questions about the ADUs. Do we know how many are expected in the town? 2, how much cost to the town in terms of services will be the impact ultimately to the taxpayers? And what will be the assessed value increase to the homeowner? Do we know any of the answers to those questions?
I'll defer to whoever raises their hand after I say for a moment. How many? I'm inclined to agree with Mr. Newton that although this is a policy that could be approved for the entirety of all the residents, 60,000+ of the town of West Hartford, it's probably going to be de minimis in terms of what's noticeable, in terms of what actually happens on it. That's just my gut instinct on it, but I don't know that. Cost to town on impact, that, you know what, I get it now. When I was typing and my mic was on, I get it. I don't know who that was, but cost to town on its impact, I think they ran a study on grand list impact and whether or not it increases their grand list. I don't know what came of that. I don't have that data. Somebody else might. Assessed value increase, I'd see that as the same thing. And then is there a fee basis to an application for that. Maybe on the margins, the town can make a little money. In terms of where the service increase issues are concerned, I don't know if that accrues to the town or to utilities, et cetera, or other bodies. But I do have a comment on that, but I'll recognize Mr. Bush first.
Okay, there was a lot of going on between her original questions and then that, so hopefully I get them all. So I don't, this is my opinion. This is not necessarily based on any fact other than I don't think that there's going to be a significant increase in the cost at all to the town. In fact, it'll actually, I think, potentially generate revenue to the town in the form of potentially increased property taxes. I know that some may disagree with that, but in my opinion, if you add an accessory dwelling unit, it adds value. So that would increase the tax base. It would also there would also be permitting fees and revenue generated through the building department, and I think the impacts to services would be minimal. I mean, the truck is driving by. If he has to pick up 1 or 2 garbage cans, I don't think it's going to matter. The cost to the infrastructure of the sewer system is zero, except for potentially to the homeowner himself, and that would be their own cost to make sure that their laterals were sufficient to handle any increased capacity use. Was there another question that you had, Commissioner Rodman?
I think that covers them, though. Is that about right? Mr. Daly.
Yeah, so a couple of items on that, if I may, Mr. Chairman. There definitely will be increase in costs with pickup on garbage. We already know that because we've heard the town council talk in the past about increasing in garbage, which was why they had originally moved us to recycling. So there definitely is significant cost to the town for increases in garbage, not just to the property owner, but to the town as well. In addition, we've also been told, right, with the Clean Water Project that there are significant issues with the sewage systems within West Hartford already. So to potentially create an even larger impact with ADUs to our sewage system could also have an environmental impact. Again, it's the whole reason why, as some have asked here, why I think more discussion and more and a more formal study is actually warranted. In fact, again, a lot of the arguments that are being made seem to support the need for an additional study for this. Thank you.
Comment from Ms. Scott, and then perhaps after that, I'll make a comment myself. Please proceed.
Yeah, through you to Mr. Daly, I understand the questions, the substantive questions that you're asking, and, we can speculate all day about how much of an impact it's supposed to have. But what I don't understand is what is the specific ask today for this commission? Is it so hypothetically, are you asking that this commission make a resolution to ask the town council to study the environmental stuff more thoroughly? Are you asking that this commission do something itself to study the environmental impacts? What is the specific ask on the table right here, right now?
Great question. Mr. Daly.
John Daly, Commissioner. No, that is an excellent question, Scott, and definitely appreciate it. And the answer is that's one of the reasons why I'm holding this discussion today, because that's one of the things I'm trying to understand and learn as to what our power is as a commission, what our responsibility is to the residents of the town, and what exactly is our responsibility, and what is the outcome. And I don't know that. If you ask me what would I like to do, I do think that with this commission, I would like us to be able to either work with the town council or the planning and zoning commission to do some sort of environmental impact study that takes a serious look at all of the items that I've mentioned before we move forward with planning and zoning considering this, because I think that the items that were under consideration are important for us to consider, even in addition to what Mr. Bush has mentioned, right, which are other items and other reasons for us to that are outside the scope of this commission to think about when it comes to ADUs. I just wanted to be specific to this commission and its authority. So I welcome ideas as far as what, and maybe Mr. Chairman, this is where we look to your guidance for, as far as what types of things can we do to make sure that that we appropriately look at this proposal before it's allowed to be passed.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Scott's framing was incisive in terms of, here are two key options. So I did appreciate that. I'll state at the outset here, having been prompted to learn about this over the past month or so, I don't think it's a bad policy. I think it's a good policy, but I want to set aside my opinions on the non-environmental aspects of the policy and leave to the commission and its members the power to collectively determine, does this fit under some form of environmental oversight that the commission should exercise, regardless of if I think, Regional Plan Association, AARP, desegregate CT, anyone else is in favor of it, and they're putting forward great rationales, in my opinion. I'm willing to set those aside if the commission is interested in exploration here. Having said that, I think it only makes coherent policy sense to be examining this from an environmental perspective if we were simultaneously seeking to examine also all new developments of residences in town, all new single-family households, pretty much applying that same lens to all of them that we would to an accessory dwelling unit. And we don't currently do that. We don't currently ask those questions of any new single-family house that wouldn't come before us to begin with. What are you going to do with sewer and with the utility running a pole out to you? That for any new greenfield development would be a greater environmental burden than it would in the footprint of an existing zone. So, I mean, that's overall, from the moment I saw it right up to now, that's the key question I had on this is, I don't see a way to split it off and still make coherent policy sense unless we're applying that same lens to all new residential development in town, or do that. If we want to be really churchy and get super environmental about it, we could say, don't do anything. Don't have any economic development, right? Let's let the forest grow. And I don't suspect that we're going to do that, and I wouldn't want to do that. And so I guess I need to hear a better reason for my support as to why to carve out just this. There's a process going on, so we would be interjecting ourselves into town planning and zoning, town council, and that's serious business that I have yet to contemplate, right? And that is perhaps the reason why it's distinct from putting an environmental review lens on all such development in town, is simply because there's a process going on regarding the potential development of this. That's the only real difference I see. And other than that, I don't think it's an anti-environment policy. And I think the folks who might be proponents of it, I've heard them make pretty good environmental cases for it as well. Ergo, you're able to shoehorn in more tax revenue, more potential homesteads, whatever you want to call that, residencies in town without expanding onto new undisturbed land, which would entail greater environmental burden. That's my take on that side of it. And I heard a point on the COVID side, which was we wouldn't want to increase density at a time when it's the everybody fan out strategy, right? For stay at home. And, I get that. In my research on this, I think it was AARP that was advocating that this is a way for, let's say you get a vulnerable person who has health issues or is of advanced age, and you need to sequester somebody or quarantine them who caught COVID-19. This is a way to do that in a self-contained dwelling unit with kitchen and bathroom available so that families could stay together, existing families, and not necessarily have to share everything. And by that I mean virus. Anyways, those are my thoughts on the issue at the moment. And because I'm going last here without offering opportunity for response, I do want to offer opportunity for response if anyone has any on my comments. Mr. Daly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, Commission member. So one of the things I would say is I'm a little bit confused with your statement about there would be changes to the zoning. Sorry, there's feedback here. I'm a little bit confused as to your comment about this would not go through the commission if somebody was building a single-family home on a property in West Hartford. I totally, first of all, agree with you on that, but I fail to see the relevance of the argument because that particular situation would be complying with the current zoning policy that's already in place. What we're talking about is a new policy, right, that would where there has been citation of environmental impact. And if that were the case, regardless, if, in other words, there was a property available, somebody wanted to build a single family home, but that single family home was outside the normal laws of the zoning that's already in place, I would feel that would come under our purview. And in this sense, that's kind of the same thing here with the ADU policy. I think that was it. Thank you.
Would they come under our purview if they were outside of traditional zoning, or would they go through zoning or the town planning office and suffer their penalty there rather than go through our potentially arbitrary screen that we might impose because we haven't formalized anything, right? Response.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Sean Daly, Commission member. Yeah, so exactly. I think that's one of the things that we've talked about as a whole, right? Which is, should this and does this? And I think the answer is we haven't made that determination, but certainly there doesn't appear anything that's preventing us from making that determination. And so I would say that in that type of situation, we should be looking at that. Otherwise, why do we exist as a commission in the first place? Thank you.
Thank you. Well, there was the junked automobiles and rodents part of our ordinance as well, so there's that. So does this turn into a letter from the commission that is of inquiry that is addressed to the town, simply flagging for them that we are interested in seeing or hearing their feedback, whether through that said letter or through their next meeting of relevance, some degree of analysis as to what they feel is the environmental aspect of this. I want to open up for consideration on actions and next steps here, because I feel like there's a few different options on the table. And I'm not sure I agree with all of them, but I certainly want to entertain all of them. Mr. Newton. And you're on mute, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ted Newton, Commissioner. So I think that I agree with Commissioner Daly on the statement, we don't know what we don't know. So to the extent that we can perhaps find out what we don't know because somebody has already looked into this, whether here in West Hartford through some kind of research that's already been done by the town staff that we're not aware of, or perhaps similar communities that have undertaken ordinances like this, I think we should learn about that and then have the discussion. Because I think what I've been hearing over the last 30 minutes is that there's not a whole lot of direct environmental impacts as traditionally have come before this this body, this commission. So, and whether we want to expand our purview or not, I think is an open question. I don't think we should do that without a lot of deliberation and clear benefits to the community for doing so. And assuming that the town staff and the TPZ, as well as the town council, have looked into the benefits and the disadvantages of this quite thoroughly. I don't know that adding another layer on top of that is a good use of our time or the good use of the town's limited funds. So I'm all in favor of seeing if we've got some information about the environmental impact on this and then making a decision after that. Back to you, Mr. Chair.
I appreciate that, Mr. Newton. I tend to be in agreement with that perspective. Are there other perspectives that folks are interested in voicing? Mr. Bush.
I agree. I don't think that there's much more for us to discuss at this point. I think seems to be a little bit outside our purvey and what we do as a commission. I think that there's been so much energy and effort put into it by the town planners, by the zoning people in zoning that we're sort of just kind of spinning our wheels on the outskirts of the discussion. So I don't really think there's much more. It's much valuable use of our time to continue the discussion. That's it. Thank you.
Yep. I appreciate that. That is my fear, that we would interject ourselves into conversations in which the counterparties are more knowledgeable already in something, and we're bringing protestations to them on something that, and seeking a process step in between, let's assume it goes through, which I don't know, between residents and what they're seeking to do, adding an extra bit of red tape to what they seek is something that should be thought carefully about. And I continue to be interested in getting smarter on it, and certainly on the environmental aspects of it, whether for positive or for negative. But I don't know if that resolves in the next few minutes, hours or days. But we could certainly keep it on the agenda for continued discussion. I would, Mr. Daly, last comment, and I'll let you close out comments on agenda item 3C before we move on to 3D.
Sure. No, I just want to clarify. So is the next step that you would be sending a letter of inquiry to the town council asking if there has been environmental considerations, and if so, to what those considerations are? And then based on their response, we would hold this as a next agenda item for discussion at our next meeting?
So what I was taking from the last several comments was that the letter of inquiry might not be a required step, but I would certainly, at the request of a commission member, be willing to reach out to the town and hear if they have, examined this or not, because as we've heard previously, the town planner's office knows this very well, and they practically wrote it, right, in terms of the ordinance. So I could either seek that communication and relay back, hey, have they looked at this? Or if commission members feel strongly about it, and I think I'd want unanimity on it, we could draft a formal letter. And Mr. Daly, I won't cut you off there since I know you'll want to respond to that.
So you're saying, okay, so you're saying you would be willing to have an informal inquiry done by you to the town council asking for environmental information, but that you feel if we wanted to send a formal letter to the town council, that would require a unanimous vote?
There's no formal process step that we are adhering to throughout this, of course. But in my own judgments, similar to my updates that I will provide on the next couple agenda items, whereby it was information that was procured simply through inquiry to the town planning office, whereby they would refer me elsewhere as required. I would do something similar on this. I would want the commission to be within its comfort level and taking this as a sampling of the full 9-member commission. If there is unanimity here, I might presume that, perhaps over presuming, but at least safely enough presume that it was non-controversial enough of a request such that there was unanimity on it that we could proceed safely. So that was probably too many words to explain my thinking on that as usual, but yeah, I'd be fine making an inquiry. Shall I leave it at that?
If I can respond, Mr. Chairman, Sean Daly, Commissioner member, I would be amenable to that, at least because I'd like to see if the answer comes back no, then certainly that gives me that they haven't done any type of impact on the environment study, then that gives me obviously more of a reason for us to pursue it. If they've come back with information and data that we can look on our own, then we can make determinations and decisions as to how we move forward. So I would be amenable for that. So my question is a formal motion required in order to have that happen?
Not to bind me to the word that I give to you. How's that sound?
Then that works for me. As long as we have it in the meeting minutes, it's good enough for me.
I'll seek information and we'll bring it up at the following meeting. Thank you for bringing this to the attention of the commission. Agenda item 3D, pesticide use at school buildings. This is another one that Commissioner Daly had found, actually, and rightfully so. This seems to be well within our purview, if anything was, and that's, the discovery of asbestos, pesticide use around children of residents of this town. That's an issue of environmental import. What I recommend to the commission in this instance is we make that a formal agenda item for the following meeting so that that way we can get potentially a presentation from either West Hartford Public Schools or facilities managers, something along those lines, as to what their spraying and pesticide intentions are with regard to properties. I see 2 hands. That's really all my thoughts at the moment. First, Mr. Bush, and second, Ms. Scott.
Can't hear you.
Yep. Sorry about that. I agree that we should formulate a strategy and carry this forward to the next meeting. I don't think that there's enough information to have a discussion of any value this evening. I do have something that I know regarding this particular issue that Field of Dreams, the organization that is currently responsible for the soccer fields around town, has recently been mandated to stop using pesticides that are not environmentally friendly. So that is already occurring in town. So I don't know the level I don't know where it stops and where it starts and who does what where. I don't know, but I do know that it's already being addressed in the town, and we should figure out who's doing what, and when, and where, and with who before we move too much further in it. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Ms. Scott.
Note, as we plan the agenda item, the curious as to whether pesticides for the purposes of the discussion will include antimicrobials. Like legally, pesticides do include like an antimicrobial soap for like wiping COVID off, the desks at school or whatever. Are we talking about that, or are we talking about like outdoor pesticides, or both? Just for our kind of planning and so we can more appropriately guide the like questions that we're asking and the person we invite to speak to us.
No, it's topical, especially with antimicrobials there. Commission members, I leave to you. Do you have a preference? Mr. Daly.
Sean Daly, Commission member. Mr. Chairman, my understanding is from the letter or email that was sent to parents, teachers, this was, I believe it was outdoor. I don't recall anything being indoor or talking about microbial. These were pesticides that were being sprayed of the schools. I think there may have been also talk, as you said, Mr. Chairman, about asbestos within the schools, but I don't recall reading anything about any antibacterial sprays due to pandemic issues.
If there are no further comments, we would presume that this would largely relate to outdoors, although tackling on antimicrobials to address COVID is definitely timely and topical. Do we want to fight that fight on that hill? Ms. Scott.
Just a point for all of our consideration as we consider forward movement on this issue. Be very careful about any global statements you make around, quote, pesticides, because it can include anything, including like a toilet bowl cleaner, because that's antimicrobial. So just before we take any action on pesticides as a broad category, I would just counsel everyone to keep in mind what that means and make sure we're talking about what we mean to talk about.
As usual, your legal environmental perspective is a valued contribution to this mission. Last one, Mr. Daly again.
Sean Daly, Commission member. Mr. Chairman, yeah, my only question is, can we be sure that I'm trying to remember the dates now of the spraying, which was included in what I sent to the rest of the commission, and are we sure that if we did have a formal presentation and had this as part of our formal agenda, that it would be able to be done before those processes begin?
As we speak, I have brought up the link in front of me and I am opening a document. It was sent September 2020 on the Integrated Pest Management Plan. The pesticide application activity for the prior year, 2019, is on the other side of this letter. So this looks like a retrospective of here's everything that the town has done and has inventoried as far as what it uses, so that folks know. So it appears to be only on a look back basis, which, it is helpful for the sake of timing, in the sense that that affords the commission the ability to examine what tends to be the routine practices that wouldn't change on a month by month, but it are more like the year by year same activities that they use regarding outdoor pesticides. And so as an enduring sort of issue, that actually lends itself to the commission pretty well, I would think. Any other comments on this one? All right, so provisionally, I think I will seek to have this on the next agenda, assuming the ability to secure a guest speaker to update us on that. Does that work? I'll take nods as an affirmative. Thank you. We're up to 9 o'clock, but we're toward the end of the agenda. We've got discussion item, new business 3E, available information on Yukon property hygiene. I reached out to the same source of information that had updated us at our August meeting. Amy Krause, Director of Health for the West Hartford Bloomfield Health District. At this time, there have been no new complaints regarding rodent activity from the Yukon property. That is the update regarding the Yukon property, which I hope is heartening to all of you. Are there any comments or questions regarding that, though, or would you want to dig deeper on any facet of it? My understanding being that it was more of a springtime, summertime issue with regard to deferred mowing and maintenance and the infill of vermin that began to be spotted around there. But as of our last update from the health district, which was in late August, they had gone out there and made inspections at a few points in time, saw some potential activity, but nothing active. And then as a follow-up, they have not seen anything active. So that's that. Any comments, questions, or areas of concern that others want to express on that? Mr. Bush.
Just a quick comment, nothing big. We're going to be seeing more regarding that property in the next couple of years or even sooner as developers start to come in and make changes to that property. There are currently offers on the property for sale. So I think that it's going to be definitely a robust topic of conversation when we talk about the wetlands and the issues that are currently there as it comes time to discuss development of it. But I think at this point, I think there's not too much to talk about. So thanks. Yep.
Thank you, sir. And thank you for your attention to it. That brings us to last agenda item, future items for consideration, which was in part looped into this past hour of conversation. Whatever other future items I had in my mind upon entering into this meeting, I do not right now. So if there's anything else from anybody else on the commission who wishes to add consideration for next month, we'll presume it's next month's meeting agenda, then feel free to raise your hand. Otherwise, we could leave that for intermeeting planning purposes. Mr. Newton.
Thank you. Matt, Commissioner Ted Newton, we had skipped an agenda item at the very beginning because the presenter wasn't here, and I just want to know if that is something we should plan for our next meeting.
Thank you, sir. We'll also provisionally plan for that in our next meeting. What was originally envisioned right here was a presentation of about 15 minutes on the various, mostly environmental, but also cost basis of different fuel types for propulsion that could be used for electric school buses. And I just tipped my own hand right there by saying electric school buses. 4 school buses, so that we could have a thorough examination, almost as we wish to do with the ADU issues, on how do we proceed, or do we proceed with applying some form of advocacy or pressure onto that contracted fleet segment that interacts so often with children around town, be it diesel, propane, electric, or possibly other sources, biodiesel, for example, in terms of how do we get our kids around, right? And originally we were going to have a 15-minute presentation from a guest on that. They couldn't make it tonight. So we'll see if they can come back. And then past that, I didn't have contemplated any actions on this meeting beyond that, other than just an informational for the commission. So we could push that out by a month, and I'm good with that. If there's anything else that folks want to add to that agenda item to supplement it, feel free to say now or shoot me a note in the meantime. Sound good? Cool. Do we have any motions to adjourn?
Motion to adjourn.
Second.
Chair recognizes Mr. Daly's motion for adjournment, and second appears to be coming from Mr. Newton. All those in favor, aye?
Aye.
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 If you're opposed, you're staying on by yourself. Thanks,
Good job,
everybody.
Matt. Good to see everybody.
Appreciate it.
Thank you,
Bye,
Matt.
folks.
Thank you.
Good job.
Take care, everybody.
Take care, everybody.